So we're not like Baxter from America because you're pretty well from Australia, aren't you?
Yeah, well,
so
that's it.
We can't even use that as a plug.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
From Somerset, it's less
From Somerset, we're not going to use that.
It's a standard Somerset accent.
That's right.
Yeah. It's so funny. When you get past Backham Road, about 100 kilometer in, everybody's American after
Can
that.
you use Can you use the bridge yet or not?
No.
They started that in 99 when you got here.
Oh, that's great.
Still going. Anyway, so we'll just kick off and go straight in. Welcome, Baxter, to the Better Blokes Project podcast. Jump straight in with your 1%er, mate. What do you think we can do every day to make ourselves better? And
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And look, I thought really long and hard about this, and I've also been, a secret fan, so I've heard some of the other great ideas here. So I thought I'd bring it back to something, and it actually comes from a TV show I liked as a kid. It was called Friday Night Lights, which was like an American football TV show about like a Texas football team, and the team had like a team saying, which was "Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose." And I've always throughout, and I must have learned that when I was 16 years old, but somehow it really resonated with me. And even to this day, I use it all the time, and it's something that I've used throughout my life. And the whole premise of it is that, your clear eyes, they're kind of talking about having a clear understanding of what's going on, all the different factors that are going on in a situation, and, being able to make a decision around that. And, clear hearts, I think, falls back down to your values. What are your values? What are the things that relate to your heart and how you do stuff and what you care about? And so with those two things in combination, they can kind of help you pass through some really difficult stuff, and but falling back onto that has always been really exciting, and I've sometimes, if I'm really struggling, I'll watch the video on YouTube where the coach is giving that coach talk before the end game of the Texas Super Bowl equivalent, and he's giving that really good speech about remember why we're here, what you got to do. And again, you're here because you care about the game and you love what you're doing, and again, that's very much gone in all aspects of my life as a father, as somebody who works in the mental health profession, as a son, as somebody who cares for my family as well. It's always been that clear eyes, full hearts can't lose.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go.
that's a sick one. That'd be really good to unpack because that's a big thing on logical decision making versus making decisions based on what you feel. So that'd be good. But first, anyone listening, if you like what you're listening to, make sure you like and subscribe to all our socials. Hit us up on that. Let us know if you want anyone in particular or anything you want to see on the podcast. But jump into a little bit about yourself, and then we'll really get stuck into it. So tell us who you are and where you're from, because it's not Tasmania.
No, not at all. So I was born in Georgia, in a small town outside of Georgia somewhere, which I can't remember because I moved to Australia when I was 5. My dad went and did some further study in Australia, in Adelaide first, and then moved around to Sydney and then rural New South Wales for a bit, in Tamworth and Gunnedah. And then I did my master's training in Tasmania. I met my lovely wife while we were both training together, and she's a local Tasmanian girl, and she was not moving to Gunnedah where it's 50 degrees in summer. So we're here, and recently we had our first daughter, so it's just been an awesome place to raise a kid up here on the Northwest.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow. So a little bit about what do you do for Crust?
Ooh, what do I do? That's a great question. Well, I think that, lots of things. I'm somebody that has lots of things to do, most of the time to keep my mind busy. But they have to be things that, I'm interested in and that I care about. One of the things is fishing. I mean, I love to fish up here. I've was recently fishing down in the Great Lakes, and it's something that's very regulating and calming for me. It's something I do with my father specifically, which is a lovely experience. And it's a really special time to be able to reflect and have open conversations with my dad, who I respect a lot, and being able to nut out some of the biggest problems and some of even the little sillier problems in life. So, I'm very outdoorsy. I have a little small farm as well. So, it really keeps me grounded, especially in the work that I do, which is often, in the mental health space, not talking about things that are necessarily positive, or things that are really tricky, and hearing some really horrible stories. So yeah, really important to have that outdoor and time to, relax and look after yourself.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I guess we'll dig right into your 1%, because I think that there's so much there that'll probably run out of time.
Yeah.
But tell us, where did it come from?
Okay, well, I think it came from, being a child, coming to Australia. They actually found out pretty early on that I had some troubles with learning, some troubles with like reading and writing, and, kind of threw that dyslexia label on me at like 6 years of age or something like that. And so I really struggled to, achieve at school. And I came from quite an academic family. My dad is very intelligent, so is my mom, and so is my brother, and quite gifted in the sense of their reading and writing abilities. And so I found that I had to work really hard to get to certain places to be able to, achieve to the level that was expected, or, might not even have been expected, but I put those pressures on myself. And I found what that did is it led me to burnout very quickly, because I would push and push and push, and then it might not have been something that I cared about, or the values. So that's that, full hearts bit of the clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. And, I had to start to understand what are actually my values. Like, what am I doing this for? Like, what are the things that are important to me? And there's tons of ways you find that, look online, and there's values, quizzes and questionnaires and stuff like that. But just finding what they are, and for me, a lot of them revolve around family, and a lot of the stuff I was doing wasn't necessarily around family. It was more around, pushing myself up as an individual, rather than I'm the type of person that likes to have people around me and care for my family. And, that now extends to me as a father and a part of a family unit, where I actually, instead of going and grinding at work and going to do a thing, in new clinical practice, like I'd much rather take my family down to the beach and go fishing for the weekend. And sometimes I'll forget that, and that's why it's really important to understand what those values are. Because if I'm going on the wrong track, often that will lead me into distress and despair, rather than being on that track that's in line with those values.
Yeah. I reckon everyone struggles with this every single day, the whole logical versus, the heart sort of choices. And it's just something that, like, how do you write it down as to, do you have a list, like a one side to the other, and compare it to make your big decisions, I suppose? More so your big decisions, but
Yeah. I feel super fortunate that my wife is also in the health profession, and we're both good verbal communicators, and we can often nut things out together. And that often looks like her sitting in bed and me walking at the end of the bed back and forth, talking through the situation. And she knows that, like, she'll put me in that position if I need it. Like, she'll know if I'm mulling over something, she's like, oh, well, let's just go and talk about it. And she knows then I can kind of nut it out. So I'll present both, because they're important. I'll present the logical side of it, remove that emotional element to it, so I can present that to her. But then I can present the other side of, like, that just really pisses me off, and it pisses me off because of this. And I know that that's not necessarily logical, but it's understanding. So I feel very fortunate. It's just having that person. It might not be a partner for somebody out there, but it can just be that person, whether it's your mate at the pub who's just really good at listening, or your friend at work who's just, good at having a lunch break and going for a walk and having a chat about something at work that's annoying you. And that process allows you to weigh up those two things, because the logical side, it gives us a lot of gifts and knowledge and understanding, but it's nothing without that emotional content as well, because otherwise we would just be robots walking in the same direction.
It's definitely something I struggle with. Is I'm a very logical based person, and I try and fit everything in those nice logical boxes, and it drives Rose absolutely up the wall, because I'm just like, that doesn't make sense. And she's like, it doesn't have to make sense, you just have to feel it. I'm like, nah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really struggle with that one.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing that we've sort of come to as well is, and I sort of picked a point there when you were saying you go fishing with your dad and you nut some things out there with him and solve a lot of problems. I drew a bit of a parallel there. If we're driving somewhere, Rose will be sitting in the car next to me. I talk to her heaps better if I'm not looking at her.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so true. And I wonder how much that relates to, like you said, the fishing. Because, my dad and I's boat is set up is that I'm actually talking at his back some of the time, just because if we're driving, like he's kind of at the front of the bow of the boat and I'm driving at the back. And it's so true. It's like we're able to kind of talk out some really tricky conversations. We've had face-to-face conversations, of course, but even when we go camping, I'm just thinking about this on the fly, but, it's true. Like we're usually looking at the fire when we're having conversations, and not necessarily straight on, because that can be confronting, especially for my dad, who comes from a different generation. Like he's been super emotionally available to me all the way through my childhood, but it's not been the easiest thing because he didn't have that growing up, So yeah, absolutely. Those angles and stuff are super, super key.
Yeah. We've spoken about that a little bit tonight. I know I said earlier about sometimes me and Yaz, like my wife, we've gone to the point where I don't want to talk about something because I'm just going to get broken down. So she'll just send me a message, be like, "Oh, do you want to text it to me?" And we'll have a conversation over text in a different room in the same house. Or like, we do the driving thing all the time. And then you say about like looking into the fireplace. Like this is what you're a clinical professional. Yeah. And is that the right word? Anyway, we'll run with it.
Yeah.
But
sounds good.
Close enough.
Like that's the level that you're doing it on too. Like you're removing looking at each other during the situation to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's such a good point. And even like I was thinking about this on my drive here today, but that specific fishing trip was interesting in that, in the morning we got up, it was a fishing comp, so we wanted to get in there early, spend the whole morning, talking jazz about fishing lures and just sledging each other and having a great time. Got to the boat ramp, 3 attempts, but finally got it in the water, went out there, and then my outboard motor wouldn't work. And you would have, this beautiful lake, calm mist, like just flat ocean. You would have never heard so many swear words like, out of my mouth at this outboard motor. And it was so interesting to see like that, and finally got it to work. There was like a little gasket loose, and we get out there, we pump out of it, and Dad's like, cues me to stop the boat. And he's like, "Oh, let's have some food." I just thought like, oh crap, like, we haven't eaten this morning because we've been having a great time. But like that even, he's my dad, and he knows me as a child and raising me as a young person, that, food is super important for regulation and calming down. It's like, oh, I wonder why Baxter lost his cool back over there at the outboard. Like he's a super relaxed guy. Like what's that about? But he's like, oh, you know what? Baxter actually just needs this, right now. It's amazing that, still at 30 odd years old, he's still able to be like, hey, you need that, without being like, Baxter, are you okay? And stuff, which is how sometimes it's really good to have conversations. My wife is really good at that and saying, "Are you okay, Baxter?" and that eliciting a response. But to my dad, I might get my back up a bit, like, "I'm fine, Dad. I'm 30. You don't need to look after me." But him being like, "Oh, hey, dude, let's have some salt and vinegar chips, man, before we go out to the spot." Like he knows, and that communication without it being said, it can be really beautiful. Yeah.
Hangry is a thing beyond a Snickers ad.
Yeah. You're not you when you're hungry.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate. Man, for me, like, I guess for me, I'm just looking for what's some practical tools or how could you practically implement your 1%er in someone else's life? Like, what advice would you give them for doing it?
Yeah, okay, 100%. So I think the first step to the magic is having a conversation, whether that be with yourself or your loved one or a mate, and just figuring out what's important to you, because we hardly ever talk about that stuff, whether in society, I think there's a big push to talk about what's going wrong and like us to try and figure out how do we fix the thing that's going wrong versus being like, hey, mate, what do you care about? Like, what are the things that are important to you? And I have a few good mates that have asked me that question, and I can tell them, oh, like my dream is family. Like I want to have the little farm, and I want to have the kids running around, and I want my wife and I to, still be able to, be together and close together. And that's what I want, they could cut us off from society. That's just what I want. And being able to articulate that. And so I think that's that full hearts bit of the Clear Eyes, Full Hearts. The next bit, the first bit, the Clear Eyes, I think it's really important to look at situations in a broad sense rather than just really focusing on a minute detail, because that often leads us down a path of distress. I could look at that fishing situation and go, like, oh, I'm trying to take my dad out on this fishing trip. He's meant to be having a good time, and I've ruined my motor. I should have checked the gasket. He's told me to check, a motor before we go out. I could have really focused in on that. But rather, if I look at it broadly, and see that, hey, well, shit, I was hungry. I was also excited. Like my emotions were high. It wasn't a negative thing. I was just highly emotional. And then it flipped quickly into upset because I was worried I was going to ruin the situation. So even by just breaking stuff out into a bigger picture rather than just smoking it on a really minute detail that's distressing, it can be hard. You know, we talk a lot about focusing in and pausing on specific parts of things, and that's really good if those things are positive. But what our mind tends to do is like hit the negatives hard. It's like, I can't believe I ruined this fishing trip by, yelling at my outboard motor like a silly dude on the water. Like I could more just look at like, I was distressed because I was hungry and dad looked after me. That was really cool, and that matters to me because family is important. So I think, bringing it back whole circle, understanding situations is bigger than just one point, and knowing what's important to you and not being ashamed of what's important to you. Because everybody has, and I've been doing the clinical practice thing for a long time now, and when I do different exercises with people, everybody comes out with different values or different combinations of values, and it's just key to look into that, I think.
I like your 1%er because it's really unique. It's not something that, there's a few channels in there that draw from stuff that we've had over the past, but it's interesting to see it brought together in this really unique, obviously tie back to a TV show, but that's really cool too. It's like it's something that you can pick up and take. Other people can pick up and take, and it's pretty easy to understand what it means.
Yeah, for sure. And the last bit where it's like can't lose, clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. The reality is it takes a little bit of stress off your shoulders too. I remember saying that stuff before I would go into exams or written exams, particularly. Like I said before, I suck, at writing stuff down and kind of freezing in the moment. But the can't lose part was like, I've studied, I've got the knowledge, I'm here because I want to work with people, and that's my goal. And I can't lose because those two things are met, even if I fail this exam, I still know I've been going on the right track and I know I'm in the right place. I know I'm doing the right thing. And so, yeah, I think it's a nice little link together. And there's lots of technical ways that people in psychology explain this. But I think, you can really simply break it down to the Dillon Panthers football team, man, in Texas. They all they wanted to do was play football, and that's, and it's a beautiful point. Yeah. It's also a great TV show. I'd recommend it to anybody.
If we can find it on YouTube. Yeah. We might need to give it a watch. Man, I really love your 1%er, and I'd love to keep on like hearing you sort of talk about that, but I feel like you've got to the real meat and potatoes of it. But my next question is really, what else do you do for your own sort of mental well-being? I know, obviously not a clinician in the space, but I know that it can be really tough and challenging. I would imagine you would have supervision and stuff like that. But aside from the professional sort of scope, what do you just do for you aside from fishing?
Yeah, hobbies is a big part of it, but I can even bring it back down a little bit more. It's like looking after you, and for me that's my brain, like knowing, and often people think that that's like a cognitive thing, like, oh, I've got to keep myself academically motivated and in the academics, which isn't the part that I'm talking about. It's more the biological stuff. So I make sure, there's a pediatric psychiatrist who talks about this acronym because they love acronyms, and they talk about HALT, or hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And if you're any of those things, your child becomes much more difficult to parent because they're in the kind of a fight or flight mode. But for me, that resonates so much because
it's 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that for me, it's the hungry, right? Like I needed those salt and vinegar chips, or I was going to put that lure in my dad. Like I was angry, and that's so true. And hungry is a big one. And luck, I don't know if it's lucky or unlucky, but my wife and I are both hungry. Like people, if we're hungry, we can't do anything. And, whether it's we're taking a plane trip, like my wife knows, like, let's go get a coffee and a donut before we get on the plane. Or let's make sure the first thing we do when we touch down in Melbourne is we go get something to eat, So that's a big one for me. And lonely is an interesting one as well, because it's hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Lonely is interesting for me because I want to describe myself as super extroverted and that I need lots of people around me, but I definitely need my family around me. And so, like, if I've been at work okay that you're on the water, in the beautiful mist and swearing at an outboard motor because you haven't had a packet of salt and vinegar chips. Like, you've got to be like, that's okay. Like, you mess up. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a trained professional. It doesn't matter if you have no idea about mental health. Just forgiving yourself and being like, that's okay. It's okay that you did that. And it was just because you were hungry, dude. Everybody gets hungry. There's a great Snickers ad about it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congrats on the first swear of the season too.
Yeah. Look, sorry. Yeah, that's. I thought you guys were an outboard motor, and I just just got going.
No, we've had a few swearies already. Yeah. But like for me, I've heard sort of similar. I haven't heard seeds. So
nice.
Sleep, exercise, education, diet, and social. So essentially the same sort of thing. But love the acronym, and that came from a clinician as well. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that, as you've mentioned, a lot of this sort of like mental well-being stuff doesn't necessarily need to be rocket science.
No, not at all. And I think that's the magic of it, right? And we know, to get nerdy out on you guys with some statistics, but, 80% of good mental health outcomes is having connection and rapport with the person that you're working with, whether that be a clinician, a mate, or whatever. So, the other 20% is, what technique you use and, whether the practice was set up in a way that looks friendly and relaxing. But really, the core chunk of it and the magic in it is relationship. And you can't, I don't know a word for it, but you can't just academicize or make really good points on how to make good relationships. You just can't do that. And I think that's why it comes back down to just human behavior and who you are. And, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look after your mental health, and you can just really look in what works for you and being okay with that.
It's really interesting that you bring up social connection. And relationships, because and I don't know if this is becoming a little bit like the gym thing from season 2.
Sticking with it.
But we've got to a general theme again, and this has happened quite a few times across our seasons where we're hearing the same sort of things come up, and the importance of social connection and being connected to a club, to mates, to having that level of connection to a clinical professional is one of the most important things to succeeding in, I guess, a mental health journey. I think is really testament to what people have sort of said and articulated about what they've found immensely useful for their mental health. And it has come up quite a lot. So it's really valuable.
No, absolutely. Absolutely it is.
It's going to be easier for me to go and join a golf club this year than it is a gym, that's for sure. I'll be selling that.
That's not a bad one to sell.
No.
Anyway, mate, I think that's probably a good spot to leave it. You've
Fantastic.
dropped a lot of nuggets for people to pull from. And I'd love to have you back on the show, maybe season 4, down the track again. Like maybe we might be able to dig a little bit more into dadding. As
absolutely.
A relative new dad myself, we'd have a bit of things to discuss there. But
definitely.
Thank you. Look, guys, if there's been anything at all that has been triggering, we always encourage to reach out to a mate, have a bit of a chat. Otherwise, talk to a GP, or you can seek out clinical support. At the very least, I do encourage people, if you are struggling, contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. Otherwise, that's it from us. Thank you very much. Cheers, Baxter.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Cheers.